very few lawyers even think of doing an MBA. For all those, fraternity people who are also thinking or sitting on fence about should they do an MBA or not. And icing on the cake here is that you not only have gotten an admit, but you have gotten an admit with a scholarship. So that is amazing. So congratulations again. Aditya, let's start by understanding your, professional journey first.
I graduated from the Bangalore in 2020, after which for a short period, I worked with a litigator in Bhopal and then a 2 year stint at a law firm in Delhi doing capital markets, which is basically doing a lot of securities law, primarily IPOs. Starting 2023, I set up my own legal consultancy and litigation practice in Madhya Pradesh, which is where I'm from. At some point, I realized that I needed to sort of build on the skill set that I already have.
Great. So, you have spent close to 5 years in the industry, having a very diverse experience of advising both public and the private sector entities. So, when did you actually thought of, doing an MBA? It's also very unique that you also are wanting to go into consulting. So, help us understanding, this thought process.
So, as you very rightly said, sir, in my role at the law firm, I worked exclusively with private sector companies and helping them go IPO, raise funds from the open markets. Uh, as is expected, these are significantly more professional companies and clients than the clients that I had in the second stint of my career, which is purely in the public sector. So I worked with the MP Housing Board, the Mining Corporation, the Electricity Board. Now the experience is drastically different, and as a lawyer, I think you're sort of trained to get into the operational aspects as well, because unless you understand what really goes on, in the back rooms, you can't put a very convincing case before the court, and you can't advise them very soundly on the law. Now, in the course of that, I realized that there are aspects where I can pitch in, but perhaps lack the skill set to do it, which is on the operations side or on the strategy side. And I think the program at ISB would be perfect for me to sort of bridge that gap and acquire that technical expertise and become a very well-rounded consultant, a very well-rounded advisor to my clients in the future. Because I already have the skill set and the technical knowledge of the law, and now the skill set of an MBA. And I think combining that with my very, very diverse experience in both public and private sectors, so sort of, and specifically, I'm looking at public sector consulting with the idea that I can bring the efficiencies of the private sector into the public sector.
Great. Nice. And as a lawyer, did you consider doing any other masters before you actually deciding that MBA is what you want to do?
Uh, I thought about the LLM, obviously, because that is sort of the logical thing to do with an undergraduate degree in the law.
Yes.
But now there are also peculiar challenges of being a lawyer. An LLM would have only made me, I mean, I would have continued to be a lawyer and would have also only made me eligible for practice in another jurisdiction and providing some academic knowledge. Whereas an MBA, I think, gives you that geographical mobility also if you're looking for it, which I'm not right now, but in case I am in the future. And again, as compared to the LLM, the MBA is a very professional degree. LLMs are typically very academic programs. The idea is that only somebody who wants to be in academia or wants to sort of research in the future will look at an LLM, and the programs are designed in that way. And it made more sense to do an MBA rather than an LLM for those reasons.
Okay. And what was your application strategy when you started filling the application? What were the primary focus areas?
Um, I think one thing that people consistently told me, friends who've been to ISP, college seniors who've been to ISP, was that, you know, people misunderstand the term diversity. When
Yes.
I think people think about diversity, they say, oh, I'm a lawyer, it's going to be very easy. Oh, I come from the defense background, very easy. I'm a fashion designer, very easy. In fact, I have a friend who came from fashion background, got rejected first time. Diversity, I think, and it is now more apparent to me, is diversity of the individual, not just professional. Of course, your professional journey or academic journey will form part of who you will be. But what is it that you very uniquely bring to ISB, bring to that cohort, and can pitch in outside of your technical and academic knowledge and skills? So everybody's feedback was try to project the best version of yourself and try to do it very honestly. Because if you try to, sugarcoat things too much or try to present yourself as somebody you're not, you will get exposed in the interview. So the approach was, well, this is who I am, this is who I wish to be, and this is how ISB sort of fills in that gap. And I think with that approach, I think the idea was to present very, very convincing story, and I think I was able to do that. Okay. Otherwise, I think in terms of strategy, there was nothing very, very specific, because I think what you've done for 5 years cannot be changed in the course of 3 or 4 essays. And it's gonna look like a white lie. So anybody will be able to see through it, particularly people at ISB who go through maybe thousands of applications every year.
After you submitted the application, how much time, after how many days did you receive an interview invite? And how much time did they give you to prepare for the interview?
I got the invite. So the deadline for the LOR was another 3 days after the submission deadline. So I think about 9 or 10 days after my application got submitted and a week after my LOR got submitted. And then another 5 days, I think I got the invite on 4th of Feb. The interview was on the 9th of Feb. So, basically 5 days. And I think that is typically the timeline they've been following, at least for this year.
Yes.
Friends who I've gotten in touch with have also received invite at similarly short notices.
Right. And how did you hear about ISBmantra, and what made you decide that maybe I should take some help from them?
It's very funny actually. I had entered the email ID of my recommender incorrectly in my ISB application, and I realized this on the last day. When the mail did not arrive, I kept asking them, and then suddenly it hit me, let me check the email ID, and the email ID was incorrect. Now, I mean, of course, the deadline was 3 days later, but I did not know it at that point. So I started to sort of Google people who can help out with this, came across ISBmantra's number, ended up calling you guys. You guys sort of helped me with that. I got in touch with Khushbu, and she said best thing to do is to write them an email, take a screenshot, call their customer care. Customer care isn't quite the right term. I think the helpline number is the better word. So I called them, and so I had gotten in touch that way. And then a couple of friends who are also past alums of ISBmantra so advised me, spoke very highly of how you guys function. One of them is, of course, another Aditya from my college who was with you last year. So 2 or 3 spoke very highly about ISBmantra. So I was fairly convinced.
And you went through a couple of mock interviews with us, with different set of people, specialists. How was your experience, and you were prepared, you had very less time left for your interview? But did any of these mock interviews, the interventions, advices was of any value, or how did that help you?
It helped tremendously, actually, sir. I think my first mock interview, in fact, was with you. And I remember the feedback being that your story is in order. What it needs is a little bit of filling of gaps in a few places. Like I remember you had specifically mentioned you don't speak about your family, and then sort of I think also on the scholarship issue, I think your feedback went a very long way in structuring a few things in a particular. And I had this idea about starting an activity-based club at ISB, and I think again structuring of that was perhaps instrumental in getting this. So that was one. Second one, Shifa was also exceptional because she comes from a consulting background, is an ISB alum. So she was able to give a lot of refinement to the idea of moving from law to consulting, and talking about the skill sets and things that would be required to make that switch, so that if they bring it up in the interview, I would not be underprepared. And I think lastly, again, another interview with Shrikant, who's also and his feedback was that while your story is in order, you sort of don't quite understand or aren't projecting correctly what you wish to get out of ISB, and reading up a lot about ISB and their website is going to help you on that. And I did that, and I think that was my second last interview. And the last interview, there was no feedback. I forget the name of the person of the interview, but I remember he had said, "This is fine. You're just good to go. Do this tomorrow, and you'll be fine." So even in that 4 or 5 day period, I think it's very visible that a lot could be structured and refined, if not changed.
And how was the actual interview when you were sitting on the hot seat?
It was very interesting. I think it was a great experience. I think a lot of people have a very standard template kind of an interview, which is they're asked a question, they give an answer, and then another question, another answer. Mine, I think, was very conversational. It was very back and forth. I also had a very interesting panel, a very diverse panel. People starting from batches of 2008 all the way up to 2018. So I think their own difference of experiences in life sort of made it also challenging, but a very interesting panel to be in front of. And I think that is also likely to happen when somebody has a different profile, like a litigating lawyer, which is very different from the majority of the people who apply to ISB. And so it sort of took its own direction, I think, and it kept changing direction also very quickly. But I think I was reasonably well prepared. I was a little nervous, I think. Khushbu will tell you about it. I called her right after the interview. So it started with this one case that assisted on as a junior a very long time ago. Sensational serial killings case. I think you also asked me a question.
Yes.
Or I think that is something that jumps out of profile, my essays.
Yeah.
And then I think a good and this is where our conversation today began. They spent a good 15-20 minutes around the idea of why do you want to make the switch from law to an MBA. So questions ranging from why not try another area of law. So let's done capital markets. Why don't you do general corporate? Then you've done litigation. Why don't you continue in this in a relatively short span of time? You've built up a fairly substantial clientele, and things look like they're going upwards. What do you want to do an MBA for if consulting does not work out? How do you think this degree will be meaningful to you? Do you think it will be meaningful to you if you were to go back to the legal profession? Why not go back to a bigger law firm? Why did you sort of only spend 2 years at law? So a lot of questions around those ideas. And I think it helped to be, well, yes, aspirational, but also grounded in giving those answers. I think my answer to the question was, well, the if MBA consulting does not work out for you, how do you think this degree will help you? I said, in the very least, it will allow me to sort of scale up this. I will go back with these connections that I will have formed at ISB. And I think in the very least, I will be a better lawyer having completed this degree, if not a consultant. So I think one, yes, there has to be an aspiration, because in the absence of an aspiration, ISB is probably going to reject you, because it is a very aspirational college. I mean, what they've done in India, trying to come up with the 1-year MBA program and then structuring it the way they have. So it is an aspirational place. So if you don't exhibit or mirror that aspiration somewhere, I think you're probably not going to make it. But at the same time, they also want you to be reasonable in your expectations. So I think it has to be a blend and have to be. I think you can't draft them beforehand, but if you have a general story at the back of your mind, I think that found will definitely help you in the interview tremendously. Actually, one thing that was very unusual was I got asked a couple of technical questions. One
Huh?
related to management, which a lot of people have told me doesn't typically happen.
Yeah.
Um,
How
so
many
a
panel
question
members were
related
there?
four. I think one was from a startup, one was in the renewable energy sector, one had a marketing background. I forget the fourth one's background.
But you didn't find any difficulty in giving answers or wherever you were required to give some technical points in your answers because they were not from the law background. So this conversation didn't had any negative effect.
What's very interesting, sir, is that the person who asked me the question, it was a question related to intellectual property rights, very specifically on patents.
Uh,
Uh, and it was, I mean, I was very surprised because clearly this person was not a lawyer, but had a very decent grasp over patent law, because that is not the question that you can randomly come up with.
right.
So I think a lot of people will sort of, often tell you, well, you can make a play on diversity. They will not know how to ask you questions. I think that is a wholly misplaced idea and a dangerous idea to go in with,
Very
because
good. Yeah.
staying in the profession uh, uh, definitely teaches you things beyond your core domain.
Yes.
I mean, this person had, and then he later told me how he had that problem. So, and why he asked me that question. So he had started a startup, filed a patent, and in the course of which had run into certain obstacles, and therefore had read up a lot on the patent regime in India.
Right.
So, so he was as good as anybody without a proper legal knowledge could. So I think that idea that you can make a play on diversity is extremely, extremely dangerous. They know a lot about a lot.
Many students who we mentor, they do ask this question that, what if there is nobody from my background in the panel? But,
Hmm.
your experience of even if they are not being the similar background, a professional background, but the work and the time they have put into their professional journey teaches them a lot. And, so that kind of help them to still ask some relevant questions.
In fact, because I've done the bulk of my legal consulting in Madhya Pradesh after leaving my law firm, uh, I got asked a lot of questions about that as well, because one of the panelists had advised a major client in the renewable sector in Madhya
Okay.
Pradesh. So he was extremely familiar with the industrial landscape, with the bureaucratic landscape, and because I have done some government work, so he was sort of
Right.
expecting me to answer. I think I answered those questions the best of the lot.
Right.
But as I said, that it is highly unlikely that you will be able to sort of scam them, for lack of a better word,
Right. Right.
uh, because the professional experience, as you very rightly said, has given them a lot.
Yes. Great. So, Aditya, now that you have an admit, is there anything special you have planned before you hit this 52-week roller coaster ride in Mohali?
I mean, well, ISB does send you the pre-term, so that has been keeping me occupied. The other sort of WhatsApp group have come up within the cohort. So some of these are activity based, some of them are general discussions, and a lot of information and a lot of knowledge is already being shared. So, and of course, reach out to people, trying to understand them better. I think that front there's like a slight handicap to being a round three applicant, because people from round one and round two have
Uh,
known each other much longer now.
right.
In fact, some of them are on what are called pre-ISB trips
Right.
together. I mean, well, one is the round three handicap. The other is I anyway have some family commitments to take care of before I join ISB.
Right.
So, which is why there's not a lot happening for me. But I can tell you that a lot goes on once you get your ISB admit.
Admit. Great. And last question before we wrap this up, Aditya. What is your advice to applicant from your fraternity, law background, who wants to do an MBA?
So this is like a slightly longish answer. So I hope you will be patient with me, as you have been. So one thing is, I think a lot of lawyers don't explore the idea of doing an MBA like they do in the West. And that has something also to do with how the profession is structured in India as against how it is structured in the West. Like in the West, there are these MBAs who sort of do law firm management. Now, that sort of a role is now starting to come up, and I think as these things go on, we will see more lawyers come to ISB, maybe go to IIM. Now that's one. The second is, if you're a lawyer, and because I got asked this question very pointedly in the interview, which is, you're a lawyer, there's a lot of stats. How are you going to be able to handle it? Because you have definitely left mathematics at least 6, 7, 8 years in the past now. And my answer was that, well, part of the answer is in the question, that it is the cohort that will help me.
Right.
And that is one. The other is that I think it would be helpful to sort of have a good quant score. I told them as much that, look, I'm not uncomfortable with numbers. I had good marks in school in maths. I also have a good score in GMAT. So I think that comforted them. So that is, I think, something that they will ask a lawyer about.
Right.
Because based on the preterm reading material itself, there is a lot of mathematics and, of course, expectedly so. The third, and this is general advice also, I think that people should try to present the best version of themselves rather than trying to be somebody else, because you hear the word diversity a lot, but that, as I already said, is diversity of the individual, not only about the profession. If you're going to try to be somebody else, there's a good chance that somebody like that already is part of the cohort and ISB doesn't see value in you. So whatever it is, whoever you are, I think just lead with that. Like I remember, I think it was a silly question to ask you one day before the interview. I, as a matter of habit, always wear cufflinks with my suit.
Right.
And I was a little iffy on the idea, is it going to be too much? Is it too flashy? But then you said that it's going to be fine. And then that is the answer I gave myself as well, that this is who I am. This has gotten me to this table. Now trying to be somebody else is probably not going to work, and I will get exposed. And I think particularly in cases of what is called a diverse profile, there is that temptation to try and be like a more regular engineer or a consultant or a CA moving into MBA and try to at least sound like them, because professionally and academically you're not that person. But I think that is a very, very bad idea. I think everybody should just stick to your guns. It's a bit of a live by the sword, die by the sword approach, but usually I think it will work. So mostly, I think, particularly for diverse profiles.
Even for others. Absolutely right, Aditya. I totally agree what you have said. And, there is only one Aditya in this world, right? So there cannot be another guy who can become like Aditya. So everybody bring their own strengths and weaknesses. And I think they should be projecting that, when the time comes or when the situation demands. That's a great advice, Aditya. And again, thank you so much for sparing your time for this recording. And it will go a long way, I'm sure, especially people who are coming from the similar background and wanting to do an MBA.